The Las Vegas Raiders select.
What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Joe Castro, aka Philly Fresco, joined as always by my guy Brandon. And it is Philly the podcast, man. So today, I know we talk a lot of Eagles. It's always Eagles, but today is not about the Eagles. Today's not about Philadelphia. Today is about the Las Vegas Raiders and their draft pick and what they're going to do. So I went and got my guy Scott, and he's going to come here and break it down to us what the Raiders are going to do. Scott, what's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be on with you guys. And let me remind you that the current chaplain of the Las Vegas Raiders is a former Philadelphia Eagle. Do you know who that is?
No.
Randall Cunningham is the chaplain for the Las Vegas Raiders. So for all you
Wow,
Eagle fans out there,
Wow.
yes.
Well, damn. Now I feel like I should have known that. Like he's in our intro video.
I gotta drop some knowledge, right, man? I gotta be useful then besides
Off the rip. I love it, man. So before we get into too much more football talk, I mean, before you drop too many more gems, let them know where you're coming from. Let them know about your podcast and where they can find you, basically.
Sure, yeah. We have a website, silverandblacktoday.com. It was the first and still is the only independent news website here in Las Vegas covering the Raiders. We started it back the day the Raiders got approved to move to Las Vegas. Started that. That led to a podcast. The podcast led to a weekly radio show on CBS Sports Radio here in Las Vegas. And then just got finished doing a daily radio show on the Raiders flagship station, which is Raider Nation Radio 920. And we also do videos and podcasts. So you can check us out at silverandblacktoday.com, where all of that is easily found.
Like we said before, man, we appreciate you taking the time coming out here because you are killing it. We do our research before we reach out to people. So you definitely are killing it out there. And I definitely respect what I see out there. So let's talk a little bit about the Raiders. It is kind of a fairly new team still. You got your little we'll say it's the honeymoon phase out of the way, right? So let's talk and see how you feel. How did you feel about this most recent Raiders season?
Well, I'll use the words of General Manager Mike Mayock and Coach John Gruden. That was disappointing. The Raiders went 8-8. They started off the season 6-3. And so to finish 8-8 after starting 6-3, they started the previous year 6-4 in 2019. So they've had two consecutive seasons of late season fades. Now, some of that is due to injuries. Josh Jacobs, both years, has had trouble on the back end of the year with injuries, as there's not been a really, I think, great viable backup to him to spell him at the running back position. And John Gruden's offense is predicated on running the ball first. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the young running back, who's incredibly talented, but just breaks down towards the end of the year. So from a disappointment perspective, the offense did really well in 2020. In fact, they were a top 10 offense. Derek Carr, who had a lot of people had doubts about going into 2020, had his best statistical year. He started to use his legs more, and I think people were a lot happier to see that. There's still a segment of Raider Nation that if Derek Carr cured cancer, would still hate him. But nonetheless, he's had a very, very good year, and the offense did well. The problem, guys, was the Raiders' defense. It was terrible. It gave up late game drives, consecutive games against Miami, against Los Angeles, and against the Chiefs at home. They could have beat the Chiefs twice. The Chiefs got the ball back with 1:40 left, and that's all Patrick Mahomes needed to beat the Raiders in their new stadium, Allegiant Stadium, here in Las Vegas. So it was disappointing. Was there progress? Yes, but is it enough progress for year 3 is my question. And I just wrote a piece up on our website this week saying that, John Gruden should be under pressure. Yeah, he's got a 10-year contract and all that jazz, but the reality is the NFL is about winning. And if you think a team after 3, now going into 4 years, if they don't make the playoffs and win a game in the playoffs, to me, that's disappointing. It's time to put up or shut up, in my view.
Definitely, yeah. 3 years of 500. So, I mean, at some point, it's got to break, right?
Starts to look like the Cowboys a little bit. But I'm kind of glad you brought up that Miami game because, honestly, that had to be, I think maybe it was toward the end of the season, probably the craziest ending to a game I've ever seen. It was just like back and forth within 1 minute, essentially. Yeah. What was your emotions going through that kind of a game?
Well, I'll tell you, I was at the game and sitting in the press box. There was this sense of impending doom, actually, amongst the media members up there, just thinking about, okay, you're giving the ball back. They can't possibly win this game, can they? But for those of us who had watched the Raiders defense all year under Paul Gunther, who was fired as the defensive coordinator. You had a lot of young talent back in the defensive backfield, and they were constantly playing out of position. And so when it happened, the fact, to me, the thing that's still most remarkable about the play, the two consecutive plays actually, is that Ryan Fitzpatrick was able to throw a ball 45 yards for a 50-plus yard gain when somebody was holding his face mask. Arden Key, the defensive end for the Raiders, had pulled his face mask. His head was turned sideways. But you know what? That's what sort of people came to expect from the Raiders. Their offense would go out and get the job done, and then their defense would come on the field and just couldn't stop the other team. And you can't win many football games in the NFL if your defense doesn't have to be a top 10 defense. Heck, if you could be middle of the road, you could make the playoffs and make some noise, but the Raiders just could not muster that sort of effort.
Definitely. Now, I know that the defense has been an issue, and I know you said you were kind of happy about actually, the quarterback play with Derek Carr, but you also had, Mr. Mariota in the background as well. So I kind of want to ask you about that because Mariota is a hot name for Philadelphia fans as far as a possible backup. So he did play well with you guys. I want to ask you kind of a two-parter, which I know is kind of a faux pas in media. You don't want to ask two questions, but I want to ask you a two-parter. I want to ask you, one, how much trust do you have in Derek Carr? And two, what did you see in Marcus Mariota that can kind of maybe translate to coming to Philly?
Oh yeah, the what do you think of Derek Carr question, which is opens the door to every whack job in Raider Nation who's going to come after me after they watch this. But no, here's the thing with Derek Carr. And like I said, he's very polarizing in Raider Nation. And I can sort of understand why. First of all, he's a great guy. He's a great citizen, a great leader. I think the issue people have with him is he's not the type of quarterback. He's not the transcendent quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. He's the kind of quarterback you can win with. I really believe you can win with Derek Carr all the way to a championship. But in order to win with him, I think you have to have all the pieces in place. He's not a Lamar Jackson. He's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not an Aaron Rodgers who really lifts his team on their shoulders when they have a dredge of talent. And that's nothing against Derek Carr. I know it sounds like a backhanded compliment. It's not meant to be that way. It's just, is he a top 10 quarterback? Yes. Is he a top 5 quarterback? Absolutely not. So I think from that perspective, I think if the Raiders can put the pieces around him, he's fine there. And I don't have any problem with him. And I said last year going into the year that he would have a big year. And sure enough, he did. That said, for me personally, I like a more dynamic quarterback. I like where the NFL is going when you look at these quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson, like Lamar Jackson, who have the ability to create on the run, who can create out of the pocket. Derek Carr is not that guy. He could do it a little bit, and he's gotten better. To his credit, he deserves all the credit in the world because he improved his game there. But for me, I like that dynamic nature because it allows the offense, in my view, to really surprise the defense and keep them on their feet. Now, Marcus Mariota, the one game he came in for an injured Derek Carr last year against the Los Angeles Chargers, he was able to do that. And I think it showed what John Gruden and the Raiders offense could be with a different style quarterback. That said, it's one game sample size. You know the history of Marcus Mariota. I think he's an incredibly talented young player, but at the same time, he also has baggage with him. And so the Raiders, if they were to keep him this year, and I know all the trade rumors like you've been talking about, if they keep him this year, they got to pay him $11 million. He was the highest paid backup in the NFL last year, and he played one game. And so can the Raiders keep him? They might. They've been clearing a lot of cap space the last week. But I do believe that Marcus Mariota deserves another chance somewhere. The question is, will his accuracy improve enough? Will he stay healthy enough? And I don't think you're going to be able to know that until he gets under center and plays consecutive games for a team who tabs him as a starter. Otherwise, I think he's a great option for a backup, and I wouldn't be surprised, as much as it would cost them, if the Raiders end up keeping him if they can't find someone who wants to maybe trade for him.
Definitely.
Yeah, so the Eagles, we found ourselves last year getting a wide receiver in the draft and Jalen Reagor, and that's kind of been like, why didn't we grab the Justin Jeffersons of the world? The Raiders had the chance to pretty much grab any receiver, and you guys grabbed Henry Ruggs. Are you comfortable with Henry Ruggs? Are you looking forward to seeing his development? Or are you kind of like the Eagles in a sense where, damn, we could have had CD, we could have had Jerry Jeudy, we could have had Justin Jefferson. So what are your thoughts on Henry Ruggs?
Well, full disclosure, I'm a big Ruggs fan. Like I advocated before the draft that they take him over the other two, and so whether I'm wrong or not, I guess we'll see over time. But I think Henry Ruggs, his struggles in his rookie year were partially his fault, and then some of it was not his fault. Meaning that he's still coming out of college. The knock on him was route running. He needed to get better at route running. And sure enough, we saw, if you watch the All 22, you could see him run routes, and it needs work. There's no question. So the Raiders knew when they drafted him what they were getting with that. Now, of course, he's got the breakaway speed and all of that. What they tended to do is use him on complete vertical routes. If you look at what he did at Alabama, where he was not the featured receiver, by the way, it was slant routes where he could create on the run after the catch. The Raiders did not use him that way. They instead just kept sending him down the sideline, and Derek Carr and Henry Ruggs never developed the repertoire with one another because I don't think the route running was crisp enough, and then I don't think the commitment from the team, from John Gruden as an offensive play caller, was there to involve him enough in the game. I think with Henry Ruggs, he talked about him being their Tyreek Hill, right? Well, if that's the case, you got to get him involved in the game. The fact that he only had 45 receptions on the year, and in some games, 1 or 2 targets, partly on the player, partly on the coach. So I think the jury is still out. I think Henry Ruggs will be fine. But at the same time, you also had Darren Waller, who ends up being your top receiver anyway. He's a top 3 tight end in the league, if not top 2. And so I think, it's easy to look back like you guys do with Jefferson. It's easy to look back and say, could we have taken that guy? But I do think he will be fine. He's just going to need to work, and the team's got to commit to him, and the players got to commit to getting better. And if they can both do that, I think he'll end up panning out being a very good wide receiver.
Yeah, I like Ruggs. I like Ruggs, especially in college. He was really fun to watch. And I had him on I have him on my franchise team. So I'm hoping he gets it together because that was a big pick for me. So I definitely need him.
And that's the thing. When he was getting drafted, the piece I wrote last March about it was there was a PFF did this heat chart of receptions for Henry Ruggs in college versus Jerry Jeudy. And if you look at Ruggs' heat chart of where he caught all his balls at Alabama, it was all from 5 to 15 yards, and a lot of it in the middle of the field. So I think Raider fans were expecting the Jerry Jeudy going down the sideline all the time, and that's not the kind of receiver he is. He gets the ball in open space on a mismatch especially, and he's gone. So I think that's where the team's got to utilize him better because I didn't see him running a whole lot of those routes.
Yeah, and I think it goes into scheme. I think me and Brandon bring this up all the time when we talk about Eagles players, like scheme over everything. Once you get to the NFL, everybody's talented. Everybody has played at high levels at some point. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And everybody has that talent. So it's about putting those players in the right position. So on that note, I would get jumped by all of our subscribers if I did not ask you about this man. I have to get this over with. This is the last person I'm going to ask you about till we get to the draft. But Nelson Aguilar, he went to Las Vegas, kind of had a little bit of a resurgence. There's talk that you guys are thinking of re-signing him. What are your thoughts on him as a player overall? And you guys re-signing him, are you behind that?
Well, I'll tell you, based on the 1-year sample size, right, of him coming to Las Vegas and having a great year, I'm not sure where they would have been without him last year because outside of Darren Waller, he was the other go-to receiver. And so Aguilar did a great job. And the talk with him coming in, it was low risk for the Raiders. You had all of the dropsy stuff, all the stuff from Philly, of course, that came with him. But he didn't show any of that here. He had a couple games where you said, oh, my gosh, is it coming back? What happened in Philly? He's dropping balls. But overall, he did great. Now, would I pay him $10 million a year? No. But they might because of the market and what's going on. And I think they're trying to sign him. But I think Nelly's been very smart in saying, look, I like the Raiders. From everything we've heard, he likes being in Las Vegas. The problem is this might be his one last chance to get a big contract. So if someone's going to overpay him, then I would wish him the best of luck and say, hey, you got to go do that. But if the Raiders were to reassign him at a level I think is below that or close to that, and he's willing to stay maybe for a couple million less than he could get somewhere else because he likes what they're doing, then that would be great. But he did a great job last year and really took on the leadership mantle. End of the season, the Miami game, some guys were laughing in the locker room, and after the locker room, he went on a tirade saying this is not how you win. This is not how winning teams act after they lose. alleging that some of his teammates quit. That's not unusual to happen in a locker room, as you guys know, but it shows the leadership. And for them, for a young team, that was a big deal for a guy that was sitting in there with a ring to step up and do that. So I think he'd be good for the Raiders. It just depends on what the cost will be.
That hurt to hear.
He actually did really well for us, and then just he did
and hey,
well for us.
In the biggest game, he did well. I mean, he helped you win a Super Bowl, so it's hard to hate on the guy, right?
Yeah, no, that was his best year too. 2017 was his best year with us, at least. He did have a great year with you guys, and I hope the best for him. To be honest, I really don't hate the guy. Philadelphia is one of the toughest cities to play in, like in my opinion, as far as our fans go. So let's get a little bit into draft. All right. So talk to me about what you think, your needs are for this draft. What's the goal of this draft?
So the Raiders have a lot of needs. And that's going back to your first question about kind of evaluating how the season went in 2020. You're now into year 4, and it's seemingly you shouldn't have as many holes, but the Raiders, due to some I think some drafting that's still a little bit jury's still out on, for example, and then some bad free agent signings have really hurt them. So now they're back to square one in certain areas. And just this week, because of the salary cap reduction down to $182 million because of COVID, the Raiders released their 2 starting guards, Richie Incognito and Gabe Jackson, and they also released Trent Brown, one of the best right tackles in football. So they suddenly have an offensive line that needs a lot of help, needs bodies. Now, the good news is that there's some in the draft, number one. Number two, the free agent market, because of the salary cap issues, is flush with offensive guards and even some tackles. So I think they're okay there. They're going to go get some bodies and some guys that probably they usually couldn't afford, but because of the cap issue, they're actually going to be able to go out and get a couple of good players. But when it comes to the draft, over the last several years, they've really focused on the defensive backfield. They focused on safety, cornerback, several times, taking Damon Arnett last year in the first round at Ohio State, taking Jonathan Abram and Trayvon Mullen the year before in 2019. So they're kind of done taking young defensive backs. In this draft, I think the key for them is defense. You have to look, you need an edge rusher, right? They drafted Cleveland Ferrell out of Clemson 2 years ago, but he's turned into more of like an inside player. And they said that was their plan all along. I don't know if I buy that, but nonetheless, he was taken 4 overall, and you usually don't take an inside defensive lineman in the top 10, but they did. And he's progressed nicely, actually. He had a nice season last year, but he's not rushing the quarterback. So they need to create that pressure up front on defense. They also need another linebacker. They signed Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski last year in free agency, one from the Bears, obviously Littleton from the Rams, Littleton underperformed. I think he'll bounce back this year. And Kwiatkowski is a good player, not a great player. So linebacker is another need, as well as interior defensive line. So you have everything pretty much on defense. They also need another free safety. Jonathan Abram, the safety that they have back there now, good young guy, can't stay on the field due to injury, and he plays a little bit reckless. And so I think they need to go get a veteran there. So that's why I don't think they'll draft. But in the draft, to me, it's got to be focused on those defensive key positions up front and then offensive line.
Right. And now that you guys are toward like the middle-ish backer end of the draft, are you kind of like, because we've asked a lot of people in the beginning of the draft if they want to trade back. And a lot of people would say, yeah, because there's a lot of value in those upper picks and you could get a lot for it. Being where you are now, would you want to trade back in the draft, or do you see a player that could help the Raiders immediately that you would trade a good amount of assets to move up in the draft?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in this year, especially with COVID, this draft to me is the most risky draft that we've had in years, because you just don't know. You got guys who opted out. You got guys who played 6 games and didn't play the competition they were supposed to. Now, there are talented players, like you said. Doesn't matter. I mean, I don't need to see Trevor Lawrence play another football game and some of these other guys, because they just have it. They do. They've done it at the highest level before. That said, if I'm the Raiders, I don't think they have the capital to move up too much. Now, moving back, they could as well. But I think at 17, where the Raiders are slotted, they're going to get a player that helps them, especially with the way the draft that you're conducting has fallen. To me, there's a couple impact players right there that if I were them, I would grab, because they need that. It's a position of need. and the player, their ability is the best available at that time as well.
Now I'm excited. Now this, I think, is the first time that I don't know the actual pick. I don't know who you're
Oh
gonna
yeah,
pick.
I don't know either.
So this is exciting. So one more question before we get into the actual pick. So this is more of a fandom thing. You know, me and you.
Sure.
I'm sure you're a fan just as much as you cover them. So come draft night, what is that one thing that you just do not want to see happen that will just totally throw you off, totally upset you?
Good question. You know, I think when you put your fan lens on, it's your team moving down in the draft if you're in the upper half of the first round or near it at least, because you're excited. You have all those players in your head that could help your team, and all of a sudden, okay, now they've traded their first round pick for 2 seconds, and now they're later in the second round. And so you're like, oh, now you got to wait. So the anticipation of what they're going to do, what did they get in return? Is there some other deal going on that you don't know about? Well, it can make it exciting. To me, it's just disappointing because you get geared up. You've done all your homework. You know what your team's going to do. You kind of have read everything. You've read all the mock drafts. You know who fits the bill for your team and their need. And then suddenly you got to wait longer. So to me, that's the frustrating piece, because if you trade out of your spot, then it ends up being a waiting and anticipation game.
Okay. Yeah, you sit there and you see the guy that you've been scouting for the past 3 months go all to waste because now you just traded out of the first round.
Or worse is, like, if you're the Raiders and you're 17, let's say you trade into the second round, and then all these players that should not have been available at number 24 or 25 or 30 are there, and you're like, holy crap. They're still there, and it's like teasing you all the way along the way.
You could have had him. You could have had him.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Let's get into it, man. This is what the people want. All right. So, Scott, at the pick number 17, who do you have the Las Vegas Raiders select?
Well, based on all of those teams that picked ahead of me in your draft here, and the Raiders' dire need for defense and pass rush up front, instead, I'm going to select an offensive tackle. Yes, Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech.
Interesting.
6'5", 315 pounds. He plays left tackle. The Raiders already have a left tackle in Colton Miller, who came out of UCLA. He was a first-round draft pick a couple years ago. He's done fantastic. But Darrisaw is a specimen, and he'll have no problem moving over to right tackle to replace Trent Brown for the Raiders. And to me, he'll be a stud in the NFL. Pass blocking, he can run zone block, he can pull, and he can find bodies in space to block. And to me, really the only downside to him is he's got to get a little stronger at the point of attack in the NFL. But what kid out of college? Very few of them don't have to. So it's not really a negative. But to me, the Raiders, that offense is dialed in. They have a need up there. And based on what I'm seeing in the defensive end of things and what you guys have, as far as the teams that drafted ahead of me in your draft, I would go with the best person who can help right away. And they have a need up front at tackle, and Darrisaw is that guy.
Darrisaw's a dog. Darrisaw's definitely a dog. I think that's a great draft pick. We'll see if it happens. They usually like speed, so I don't know. We got to see his 40 time first. But
the thing is, like, nobody ever goes yes when you pick an offensive tackle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the first round, it's just not sexy. When Colton Miller got selected by the Raiders, he might have been overdrafted a little bit. And Raider Nation thought the world was coming to an end. How do you draft this guy? And he's slow, and now he's turned into. I mean, he really should have been a Pro Bowl left tackle last year. He played that well. So to me, though, that need up front to protect your quarterback, to keep that offense moving, is important. And based on who was there, that's who I would take. Right behind him was Karamoa from Notre Dame, the linebacker. But I'm a Notre Dame fan too, so I'm a little biased. But I like that guy there too because he's explosive, and he plays that little bit of a hybrid role, which I think is becoming just like Justin Simmons. The problem the reason I didn't take him was I don't trust that the Raiders would have a plan for a guy like that. I don't sense Gus Bradley's in his first year as the defensive coordinator, and I'm just not sure what he's going to do with hybrid players. So that's why I went offensive line.
You can't go wrong with offensive line. I mean, if you're going to rock with Carr and he's going to be the guy for at least the next couple of years, You know he already had a gruesome injury, and that kind of sets you guys back a couple years. So to shore up that offensive line, get confidence in Carr that he's going to feel protected and not going to get knocked down, you can't go wrong with that. You really can't.
Well, and that's the thing. If this was a stud year for defensive line, if there was a lot more guys there up in the first round, then I probably would have gone there because look, defensive line, offensive line to win a Super Bowl. I mean, we saw it this year. You got to have defensive line, offensive line, and quarterback, right? Yes, you can add in all the other pieces, and you need receivers, you need running backs. But at the end of the day, it's those three areas where you have to be dominant to win a Super Bowl. And so to me, you got to go with your best player. If your best player is an offensive tackle at that position, go with it. If it's a defensive tackle or a defensive end, go with it. And so to me, seeing how the draft board fell for you guys in your draft, Darisaw being there, who I didn't expect to be there at that point, would be a guy that I would jump at.
Now it's getting interesting. Scott, I appreciate you coming on here so much, man. One more time for the people watching, please let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, check out our website, silverandblacktoday.com, where you can get the latest Raider Nation news out of Las Vegas. Even if you're a Philly fan and you just want to see what's going on in Vegas. Also, we have you can check our show out on any podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, radio.com, wherever you find it, you can do that too. We do a show very down the middle, man. We talk about the good, the bad with the Raiders, but we also cover the wider league. We have national guests from around the country. So you can check us out any of those places.
We play them this season. We're going to be, yeah. I think the Eagles are going to Las Vegas. So definitely be going on your website, doing some scouting throughout the season.
Well, you guys, when you guys come out, we'll do a live podcast when you guys are here. We could just do a crossover.
Yeah, that would be dope. Yeah, we actually got invited from one of our subscribers lives out in Vegas. And I guess they do like a big, what's it called? What's the thing? I can't even think right now because
tailgate.
We haven't done it so long. Yeah, tailgate. It's 2020 now. I'm forgetting that there's even social stuff. But yeah, I guess he lives out there and they do.
His name wasn't Bryce Harper, was it?
I wish. That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
He's a Vegas guy, so.
That would be maybe one day. I know he's a Philly fan, so maybe one day. But listen, again, I appreciate you so much coming out here, just taking your time, chopping it up. Like I said, we will have all your information in the description. So if you're trying to go check up on Nelson Aguilar or, no, I'm just kidding. Definitely go check him out. But other than that, y'all know what it is, man. It is Fly Eagles Fly, and we are out here. Peace.
Yeah. Fly Eagles Fly. Touchdown, time to get Jalen this ring. You don't really want to start a thing. This a bird game nation, baby. It's a Philly thing. Hater, and you looking like you type trash. I'm just here calling with Philly the podcast. And we can call him